That idea that you can have AI as this collaborative partner that you can either bounce ideas off of, it might be able to generate paths of exploration that you didn't consider. That sort of iterative cycle, I think, is incredibly interesting.
Hi, this is your host Swapnil Bhartiya and welcome to TFR Let's Talk. Today we have with us Tina Huang, founder and CTO of Transposit. Tina, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's my pleasure to host you here today. And since this is the first time you and I are talking and you're also founder of the company, so I would like to just quickly talk about the story and history of the company. What led you to create this company? What problem you saw? You felt like, hey, we still need to solve this.
One of our main goals has always been around being able to capture a lot of the institutional knowledge that lives inside various workplaces, and to really be able to allow companies to leverage that for their operations. What's interesting is when we first went on this journey, that was circa 2019, and that at that time, we didn't have the power of things like LLMs to really do a lot of what we aspired to do. And so our approach was a lot more around using dynamic runbooks, using automation, leveraging our integration platform in order to solve this higher goal. But now that we have this new technology with LLMs, we're taking completely different approaches for solving that same problem.
And when we look at organizations, what kind of personas, teams do you feel Transposit is catering to?
Almost all operational teams have can derive value from a product like Transposit, but in many ways, as organizations grow and scale, the challenges around collaboration, kind of silos of knowledge, being able to communicate across teams the right information at the right time, it just becomes much, much more significant. And so we find that in many ways, for larger, more complex organizations, they're the ones that have the greatest pain point. But even internally within Transposit, and we're still a fairly small startup, we see value in a lot of knowledge share and being able to extract that data as well.
Since you said in the early days, things like LLMs were not there. Now LLMs are here, and this space is also evolving at a very fast rate. How do you see that LLMs are kind of changing the role of engineering operations?
I mean, I think that before, if you imagine, the core of a lot of operations was really rooted in process and very statically created documentation, either in the form of various knowledge-based articles or, in the DevOps IT space, what we call run books. And so what LLMs allow us to do is take a lot of sort of ambient context and knowledge and actually almost extract out the critical pieces of information without it having to be structured a priori and captured a priori.
When we look at the challenges that they face, of course, there are technological challenges, but everybody agrees that people is a bigger problem than the tech challenges. And also, we are once again seeing a new wave of layoffs. Teams are becoming smaller, shorter. So talk about the role of LLMs, generative AI, and Transposit to make teams more efficient.
What you just touched on with sort of the changes in organizational structure is at the root of, I think, one of the challenges of operational teams, which is you're constantly trying to onboard new engineers and having engineers, leave your organization. And with each engineer that leaves, you lose some piece of knowledge about how the systems work, about how to debug, about your operations, and you're quickly trying to onboard new engineers to do those tasks. And so, one of my hopes is that we can leverage AI to almost be the shared knowledge base that anyone can sort of tap into and leverage. One of the things that I often think about is the power of LLMs to intuit and be that kind of shared intuition. And part of that is based off the fact that LLMs are able to hold a lot of context into their memory all at once, more than most individual humans can do.
What role do you see of LLMs in other aspects also? Once again, looking at the holistic view we can talk about observability, we can talk about security, we can talk about cost optimization. There's so many areas that can be affected by it.
I am a huge fan of the idea of AI co-pilots and that model where you can leverage AI to either in some ways outsource a lot of small tasks, which is one of the ways that I use products like GitHub Copilot in my day-to-day engineering. I also use AI as a collaborator for, writing content and copy as well. But, that idea that you can have AI as this collaborative partner that you can either bounce ideas off of, it might be able to generate paths of exploration that you didn't consider. That sort of iterative cycle, I think, is incredibly interesting.
In modern world, despite the vendor sprawl, despite all these open source technologies, do you still see that there are some gaps when it comes to either incident response management, it comes to observability, so as to prepare teams before things go wrong?
One of the things that you touched on earlier is that all the core problems are human problems. And so I think that a lot of the focus has always been on capturing system data. And so the observability tools really tend to focus on, system logs, system outputs, just what's happening in your operational environment. But we've traditionally not seen a lot of this tooling focused on the human-generated data and also the human coordination and communication sides of things. So, when I think about human-generated data, I often think about all of our chat communications like Slack, as well as, ticketing systems, which tend to have, very free-form, they have structured fields, but a lot of the real value is in like the free-form commentary that happens. People tend to focus on the actual change and the code change, but I think there's tons of useful information to mine from pull requests and the commentary that people have around, potential risks and trade-offs of their changes.
And how much do you see that collaboration within teams or between teams or across departments is important? How LLMs or, any other, AI technologies enable that?
One of the funny strengths of LLMs is to be able to translate various communications to various audiences. And so, one of the challenges I think has traditionally been that companies struggle with is, you have engineers who are on call and they tend to speak at a highly technical level. And it's very hard to get them to distill out the essence for, the non-technical stakeholders, whether that is your customer success, operations people who are trying to communicate statuses to your customers, or, non-technical executives. And, for many of those people, they've had to rely on humans to really do that translation and distill out that information. And, I think that even the people in those roles will say that that translation is not the most, exciting and strategic part of their job, but it's something that they're left having to do. And so I feel like, LLMs give us the opportunity to allow highly technical people to be able to communicate with all of these different functions of the organization very easily.
There's a lot of hype, and this hype is not. This hype is the scale of Kubernetes and Docker containers. Companies have started using in production. When you talk to, either customers or your peers, what is is there also some difference between the reality versus their expectations? Even when we look at things like Copilot, I mean, at one point, cloud was a magic place. Yes, Copilot does seem like magic, but there are some limitations. So, what I'm trying to understand is that teams, when they look at it, they should once again not get, what, oh, it's going to solve all our problems. There are a lot of things to be done at their end also. I'm just trying to understand the disconnect between the reality versus imagination.
I mean, I have also lived through the move to cloud, the promises of, cloud agnostic environments. So very much understand where you're coming from there. I think that there's a few things that are unique, or the way that I think about AI today. One is AI is almost a new skill that people have to learn, and it's on a growth trajectory that we don't even the people building the technology don't fully understand. And so I view it more about companies needing to just adopt this skill and learn what the technology can do with curiosity and an open mind. The other piece that I really think about is when you talk about the differences with AI and these other waves is, the acceleration on what it can do, I think is significantly greater than we've ever seen before. And so I think a lot more companies are open-minded around adopting for its promise, and then, finding good uses for it. But one of the things that I tend to see a lot of is people who look at AI and they just try to make the square peg fit into the round hole, as opposed to really learning what the technology can do, and then understanding that this is just a power tool, and how do I want to apply it into my organization or my workflow or my day-to-day operations.
When we look at the whole AI, once again, things get intimidating. It's like AI has been around for a long time, but when you look at LLMs and all the whole generative AI movement that is going on, it overwhelms teams. How is Transposit kind of lowering that barrier of entry to enable customers to start leveraging those technologies on day one instead of waiting to build all the in-house capabilities?
The areas of focus for what you have to build is very different with LLMs than previous iterations of machine learning. With previous iterations of machine learning, it was a lot of needing data scientists in-house to help train your internal models. With LLMs, especially the larger models like GPT-4, I think there's a lot less need to do even fine tuning on the models for a lot of use cases. The challenge is instead that you need to build a lot of plumbing and pipes in order to aggregate and collect all of the appropriate context and pass the correct subset of it at the right time to the LLM. And so a lot of that is an integration problem into all of these different sources, but also being able to embed that into your workflows. So, an easy way to think about it is there's a huge difference between a conversation you might have as a developer with ChatGPT to help you write some code versus having some of that baked inside your IDE. So, I use both the GitHub Copilot as well as JetBrains AI assistant that is baked into IntelliJ. And, those products are able to gather very quickly all of the context of the necessary code around what you're working on, and then package that up to the LLM to make it much, much faster and more iterative to ask the appropriate questions. You scale that through to something like operations, where a lot of that context is buried in tons of different systems like Slack, your observability tools. As a human, to even copy paste all of that data into something like ChatGPT would be more time consuming in many cases than just solving the problem itself. So, I think adoption really looks like finding the right tool set that can help pull together all of this context and really embed it into your workflows.
When it comes to LLM and these technologies, we are also seeing a lot of regulations. We are concerned about whole copyright. What are the issues that you feel realistically can slow down the pace of development in this space, or you feel that this is like any other technology, these are some primary roadblocks, but companies will overcome these?
I think that some of the companies like OpenAI have done a decent job with some of the terms of service, being able to allow if you're using their, enterprise plans, they don't take your data in order to help train the models. I think that as companies are doing fine tuning, they need to have an approach that really is able to isolate and segregate various customers' data. But for me, I think we're still so early in the technology that I'm largely just following along and letting some of it shake out because I think depending on how you're utilizing the LLMs, you're at greater or worse risk. For certain spaces, I think that if you're doing a lot of creative content generation, I think that, the copyright problems are very real and very now. So, if you're Adobe helping people create net new, art and design, I think that those creatives are very, very concerned about copyright and how it affects um, the value of what they're producing. In cases like operations and how Transposit is using LLMs, I think it's a little bit less risky. We're not even in the business of helping you generate code per se. We are more helping you navigate different process and operational pathways. And honestly, I think a lot of that, even people in operations would say, is fairly standard across organizations, right? So it's really taking what are fairly understood strategies and processes and applying it to the specifics of your organization.
Do you have any, of course, I will not ask you to share the whole playbook, but some advice that as operations teams look at leveraging LLMs, what are the things that they should do? What are the things they should not do? We already talk about the unrealistic expectations, but so that they once again leverage, they get most out of it, irrespective of whether they are using it through Transposit or LLMs in general.
The big thing that I would say to anyone, and this doesn't really even apply specifically to LLMs, but just a question around how you choose vendors in general is, you really should make sure that you're focusing on the things that drive unique business value to your company and partner with vendors on the parts that are less true. And so I think that on the surface, a lot of people look at LLMs and they think, okay, this is like this magic pixie dust that's going to solve all of my problems, or they're highly skeptical and go the other extreme and say that, I don't want to touch or utilize this at all right now. I think that, the reality, as always, is somewhere in between those two. And, you really, in order to leverage the LLMs, you need all of those pipes and that plumbing, for being able to whether you're doing a search-based problem and wanting to run embeddings so that on all of your knowledge base so that you can find that data later, or if you're trying to pull together different pieces of your operational workflow and ask an LLM a question, I think that you really there's a lot of work that goes into connecting all those pipes. And so I'd say that organizations should probably look to partner with companies that are doing that kind of work because I think that it really is non-trivial and something that probably does not directly add value to most organizations.
Can you also talk about the business value of LMs for companies?
There is one way that a lot of people talk about it, which is a developer productivity angle, where LLMs allow you to accelerate what you can do, right? Like if I can help your engineers handle their on-call duties with a lot less time and energy, that obviously is going to unblock and unleash a lot more time for them to be building new features into your product and accelerate your business. The other way that I think about it, though, is there's risk, right? So most organizations, as we touched on earlier, have have a lot of churn in employees, a lot of people who are every day coming and going, and each employee that leaves is some amount of operational risk to your organization. And so one of the ways that I think about the business value is, are you able to leverage LLMs to, offload some of that risk factor by encoding all of your institutional knowledge into something that your organization can effectively own and control, with much more so than individual humans.
What kind of advancements you want to see when it comes to LLM, or what kind of advancements you see are coming to further improve the efficiency of operations team?
Right now, people are doing are largely focused around what we've called the RAG stack, which is retrieval augmented generation, and that is taking all of your various documents and being able to do embeddings and be able to find the right documents to pass to an LLM to help answer questions. And I think that is pretty simplistic. It's powerful, but it's pretty simplistic. There's a lot of other areas where you can imagine expanding that kind of architecture in order to leverage LLMs at the ingestion stage, even before embeddings, being able to extract out higher levels of understanding of your data before you get there. And so, I think that it's not necessarily about the LLMs directly, but the engineering ecosystem around there. I think that we're going to see in the next year some really interesting innovations on that side.
Tina, thank you so much for taking time out today. Great insights there. And I would love to, as usual, have you back on the show again. Thank you.
Thank you very much.